This episode of History Saver 1941 is brought to you by Civil War Navy, the magazine, where the history of Civil War naval warfare explodes onto the pages of this excellent quarterly publication. This month, read about the U.S. Navy's missed opportunity at Vicksburg in 1862. Flag Officer David G. Farragut's first failed attempt to capture Vicksburg after the capture of New Orleans is described in detail and analyzed. In order to get your subscription of Civil War Navy, the magazine, you can use code VIDEO1941 for your chance to receive 20% off your net subscription. Again, that's VIDEO1941 code at checkout. The following contains images that may be disturbing to some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. All right, so we have made it out of the Vicksburg National Military Park, and we're downtown in the old historic district, the site that saw a lot of the civilian bombardments during the siege of Vicksburg, from Union gunboats to the river that's just in front of us. But where we're going today is right here to the Vicksburg Civil War Museum, and we're going to check out some very cool artifacts as here in this museum that not a lot of people even know about. So if you're ever here in Vicksburg on Washington Street, come visit the Vicksburg Civil War Museum. So let's go inside and check it out. So we are in Vicksburg, Mississippi. We have made our way out of the Vicksburg National Military Park, gotten some AC because it has been very hot on that battlefield. This is probably the 7th, 8th episode of this series, and we have made our way to probably, in my opinion, one of the coolest Civil War museums that I've ever been in, and I've been into a lot of museums all over the world. But this is the Vicksburg Civil War Museum right on Washington Street in downtown Vicksburg. If you want to know anything about the battle siege of Vicksburg, you've got to come downtown anyway to get a grasp of what's going on. You might as well stop in here because I'm going to tell you right now, you will not be sorry. We saw this and learned about this place from the American Battlefield Trust. Go support them, the American Battlefield Trust, here on YouTube. Support their cause. I do. They're not sponsoring this video, but we're avid supporters of those guys. Go check out the History Underground, also Project Past, and Vlogging Through History. Go check those guys out. And let's do a museum that JD hasn't did, okay? So let's dive into the Vicksburg Civil War Museum, and let's get somebody that knows a little bit more than I do about this massive collection here. All right, guys, so this is the owner of the Vicksburg Civil War Museum, Mr. Charles Pendleton. This is his museum. You have one of the most massive collections here that I've ever seen. How'd you get started in this?
I kind of ended up with a couple of Civil War guns, and that sparked everything. I didn't know what they were. I took them to a show, and I got very interested, mainly for two reasons. I noticed at the show, I was the only black person at the Civil War show, and somebody was going to tell me, and it's that way even now when I go to Civil War shows, somebody say the war had nothing to do with slavery, and that really sparked my interest.
So when did you start collecting this stuff?
About 5 years ago.
5 years ago. How many items do you have in this museum?
Oh God, I have no idea.
Guys, just to give you an overview, we're standing at the front over here by the front entrance, and this is what you see when you walk in this place. It is absolutely massive. And what kind of displays do you try to put up here and really push?
The main thing is the secession letters, and I think we do have a lot of cool artifacts, but the most photographed items in here is my mission statement and the secession letters. And I'm surprised at the number of people that study the Civil War that has never seen those secession letters. I get teachers that come in here that say they didn't even know they exist. I'm also a quirky kind of guy. These coffee pots, that was kind of a thing that I thought was different, you know, and we don't think about it today how important coffee was to those guys because they were drinking water from creeks and streams, and by boiling it, making coffee, you kind of purified it, so that was pretty important, the water.
Are all of these coffee pots original?
Yes, yes. Everything in the museum is original.
Guys, this is a lot of coffee pots. This is a lot of coffee pots. And the secession letters, if you guys aren't familiar with what secession letters are, they're the letters that the states put in place when they seceded from the Union. And it kind of explained why they were seceding from the Union, correct? And it kind of said their reasoning. A lot of people don't take the time to read these, but if you come in this museum, I guarantee you, you will see each and every secession letter on display here, copies of the originals. And one of the things that did catch my eye is, you know, we were out, Charles, at the Vicksburg battlefield earlier in this series. And one of the things I didn't mention in that series was the bodies, how the bodies laid in the heat on that battlefield. Right. There was a truce between the armies to come out and bury those. Right. A lot of people, you probably haven't seen one of these. A lot of people don't know that it exists, but this is a body hook. And it just caught my eye because it's something that's kind of personal. But this is what the guys would do. This is a bayonet that's been transformed into a body hook. They'll bend the end of the bayonet, take this, grab the guy with his belt loop or somewhere on his clothes, and pull him into the grave. So this thing has pulled several bodies.
Most museums, Civil War museums, especially Southern, they try to separate the slavery aspect from it. It's impossible. The war was about slavery. And here I've got a depiction of a cotton field, which is what typically you'd have seen in Mississippi. There's a black guy in the cotton field, basically working in the field. And that's typically what you would have seen. Here's a typical, maybe upscale house that families of slaves would have lived in.
So you have constructed an entire replica of a slave cabin inside of this museum, just so that people get a sense of the conditions you had to live in.
And in there's people talking, and the voices are actual slaves that were recorded in the 1930s of people, slaves talking.
Wow. And that's something I'm gonna be honest, I didn't know, is that there were actually recordings from some people who were slaves, earlier in their life.
Somebody had the forward thinking to record these last few slaves before they died.
So guys, you got to come check this out. I've never seen this in a museum anywhere, Gettysburg, wherever. I've never seen this. This is worth the trip all on its own because it really gives you that personal connection of the deeper cause and the deeper root of what was going on behind the scenes of the front lines of the war. And you could actually walk in this cabin, like he was saying, and view what it looked like to live in this place.
And on the bed, if you focus, it's a picture of a woman that was whipped. So it gives you a sense that they not only whipped the men slaves, they also whipped the women also.
Wow.
It's a depiction of the Klan. Most of my Civil War buddies say this should not be associated with the Civil War, but the Klan was actually made up, the original Klan was made up of Confederate veterans from the Civil War, so I don't think you can separate it. The Confederate veterans formed the Klan.
Wow.
To me, this is important because if you're like me and you think, okay, well, what happened after the war? What was it like? What were the feelings like? This will tell you, that guys didn't stop fighting and go home and live happily ever after. There were still bitter feelings after the war ended. Right here is a document, and it's kind of a list of slaves that were sold and their prices. You've got a guy that was sold for $250. You got a 1-year-old baby that was sold for $60.
Wow. So this is basically just receipts of sale then?
Correct. And in this case, this is somebody's entire estate. And this was a pretty wealthy person, because that's several pages of property that they sold. And unfortunately, they listed people as property.
Wow. Now, what is this on the floor right here?
This is shackles, a neck restraint where they would use this to load and unload slaves from ships. They would chain that around your neck, and it's got spikes in the back, so if you tried to fight, they could poke you in the back of the neck with it. And the chain, if you tried to run, they could pull you back and restrain you. And the other little thing that's in there is a collar that they would put on your ankle or around your neck, and it's got bells in it, so if you tried to run, they could keep up with you, because you could hear the little bells jingling on the inside.
All right, so one of the cool things here, and I'm gonna steal this line from JD from the History Underground, go check him out, is guns, 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 and artillery and swords. There is so many guns along this wall in here. It is unreal. There is virtually, I think, every gun ever used during the American Civil War on this wall by both sides. And you can see they're color-coded, blue and red. Well, that's Confederate rifles, and then the blue, of course, is Union rifles. Am I correct?
Somewhat.
So
Tried blue and gray, and it just didn't contrast good enough. I've got 4 more Union rifles because 4 more were available. Confederate rifles, Confederate stuff, period. It's 10 times more expensive than Union stuff, and it's 10 times less available as Union stuff. So I guess for every, in total, I may have 10 Confederate rifles. I may have 15 Confederate guns total. Everything else would be Union.
wow. So what's some of the most prized pieces that you have in here as
In
far as
terms
weapons?
of weapons, this figure 8 Savage in North, there was only 250 made, 240 of the other one. So they're pretty rare, pretty hard to find. This gun, for me, it's kind of my prized possession. And the Derringer and the rifle was made right here in Vicksburg, 1 block up the street from where we are now, by a guy named Lewis Hoffman. His building that he worked out of about 2 years ago just collapsed about 2 years ago, and it collapsed because somebody was pressure washing, and they pressure washed the dried mortar from between the bricks, and it made the building collapse.
Huh.
And that's been a couple of years ago.
Wow.
Another rare and not talked about gun is the Butterfield. They made 640 of them, and I have 2 or 3 of them in here, so there's 630 something more of them out there running around somewhere.
What is this pistol right here?
That's called a naval cutlass, and again, you see a small quantity of those made. So
I noticed there's a lot of Doug rifles on the wall here too, guys.
yeah.
So, I mean, you come here, you're going to see virtually almost every rifle that there was during the Civil War in manufacturing. What do you think is the most rare rifle that was used during the Civil War in your collection?
A lot of them were used, well, in this case that we're looking at, the Lindsay 2-trigger or 2-hammer rifle. If you got 2 hammers and 1 trigger, that was pretty rare. It didn't work, so it was not used very well, but the government did honor the contract. Under that Lindsay, though, is the Confederate CS Richmond. That's got the high hump. If you look at the hammer, you see how the hump goes all the way up under the hammer. Then the next one down is another CS Richmond with a lower hump, and the bottom one, another Richmond with a lower hump.
Wow.
And then the other two are Confederate rifles, but they're Fayetteville's, and all of these were products of Harper's Ferry. When the Confederate Army took the arsenal at Harper's Ferry, they made the Richmond rifle in Richmond, Virginia, and the Fayetteville, they made that in North Carolina.
All right, guys, so this is a little bit about this museum. You can spend all day in here. He can spend all day talking. But we want to give you a taste. I don't want to give you the entire museum because that leaves stuff out. And when I leave stuff out, you guys want to come see it more. And trust me, there's a lot of cool stuff in here that I left out. You will probably see some B-roll of a couple of different items in here that we didn't talk about. But I think one of my favorite items that I've seen in here, just passing by before we started talking, when I was looking through, was actually this stuff right here, hardtack, sardine can and tin cans. And why is that? Because here in Vicksburg, the main reason why Vicksburg was key to Abraham Lincoln wanting the city, wanting to put the key of the city in his pocket, was because items like that would come down the Mississippi River, feed the Confederacy, supply the Confederate Army, and without those items being able to be shipped on the Mississippi, the Army will basically die itself off. And a lot of people, because of the time frame of Gettysburg happening, it overshadows the siege of Vicksburg. In reality, it shouldn't be that way. Gettysburg was important, yes, but the siege of Vicksburg was more important. And if you come here to learn about the siege of Vicksburg, this guy is going to help you learn anything you want to know about it, because all you got to do is walk in and look at this place. And Appreciate everything. Appreciate you talking to us.
Absolutely.
Taking us around this cool museum. Also, check out the American Battlefield Trust on their YouTube channel. There is or Emerging Civil War, one of those YouTube channels. You got to go check both of them out anyway. But look for this museum on there, Emerging Civil War and American Battlefield Trust. It's on one of them. I can't remember. But Chris White was in here doing an episode. That's how I learned about this place. So go check it out for yourself. Until next time, guys, we'll see you down the road. Keep preserving history. Stay safe. Come visit this place. Trust me. All right, so that is the Vicksburg Civil War Museum. Come check it out. And pretty cool place. But, of course, we couldn't leave there without buying some kind of souvenir from the Battle of Vicksburg. And we'll show you that a little bit later. Have some special plans for it. So, with that being said, guys, we're going to get out of here. And until next time, keep preserving history. Stay safe. And we'll see you in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania.